Thank you very much for being here today. Chief Sullivan and Sheriff Easter, I would like to address some of the concerns and misinformation that is going around our community in regards to House Bill 2350, but it's going to include human trafficking and smuggling and aggravated human trafficking and smuggling. And thank you very much for joining us here today. Chief?
All right, good morning. Appreciate you being here today. Good morning to everyone, and especially a great partner in the community, Jenny Tellez, and also Mrs. Pena. And we also have Councilperson Ballard, who has a significant portion of our Hispanic community within her council district, who has a very special interest in this issue here today. Sheriff Easter and I are here together to provide information and clarify details regarding House Bill 2350 and how the Sedgwick County Sheriff's Office and the Wichita Police Department intend to approach enforcing it. We want to address any rumors or misinformation and assure that the community has a clear understanding of the bill's provisions and how they will be implemented in our community moving forward. House Bill 2350 in Kansas, which will become effective on July 1st, 2023, creates the crimes of human smuggling and aggravated human smuggling. The bill defines human smuggling as intentionally transporting, harboring, or concealing an individual into or within Kansas, knowing or should have known that the person is entering or remaining in the United States illegally, benefiting financially, or receiving anything of value, and knowing or should have known that the individual being smuggled is likely to be exploited for the financial gain of another. The Wichita Police Department would like to clarify its approach to this bill and its focus on the criminal aspects of human smuggling. The Wichita Police Department will only intervene when elements of the crime of human smuggling are present, or when a citizen reports a crime involving human smuggling. Furthermore, I want to reiterate, Policy 514 of the Wichita Police Department explicitly states that officers will not initiate any action based solely on an individual's immigration status. They will not ask for identification or documents to establish a person's immigration status unless there is evidence some other crime has been committed. By outlining Policy 514, the Wichita Police Department aims to ensure that its actions are never solely driven by immigration status, but to ensure that all of our actions are centered on addressing criminal activity and maintaining public safety for all. This approach will help foster trust within our community and ensure that our law enforcement efforts are targeted towards addressing significant criminal activity while always respecting the rights and dignity of all individuals within our community. Now, here to tell us about the Sedgwick County's proposed approach is our great Sheriff, Jeff Easter. Jeff?
Thank you, Chief Sullivan. I appreciate that. So from a standpoint from the Sedgwick County Sheriff's Office, when it comes to House Bill 2350, it's actually the same approach that Chief Sullivan has outlined. We will take a look if any reports come to us from victims stating that they have been illegally smuggled or have been smuggled into this country for some type of profit for the person that has smuggled them into here. That's the intent of the bill. When it comes to our general practice, it has been our general practice, even before I became sheriff, that we don't get involved in immigration issues. That is not something that we're tasked to do or even able to do as law enforcement in the state of Kansas. And so, with that being said, is there some broad context to this particular bill that could be confusing? Yes, there is. The fact of the matter is that we have to prove elements of a crime. And we will see what that looks like once the law goes into effect July 1st. And if we have any cases that fit this kind of criteria, and we present those kind of cases, what that looks like. Or if there needs to be some cleanup on this bill next legislative session. And so we've worked with the Hispanic community for years to build that trust. And the fact of the matter is that the trust should still be there with the Hispanic community, with the Sedgwick County Sheriff's Office, and with the Wichita Police Department, because both of us are very, very similar in how we approach immigration issues and how we will approach this particular bill. Thank you.
Jenny Silva, and I am part of the community. I'm an immigrant myself, and I work with a lot of families that are that have mixed status. So this bill definitely brought a lot of fear and questions about just their safety and communication and collaboration with law enforcement. So I'm very grateful for both sheriff and chief to talk to us about what what is the plan for them moving forward related to this bill. We will continue to advocate to unite the community and make sure that the collaboration and communication with law enforcement continues, because we don't want people to feel fear when reporting crime, when in fact, we really want that collaboration. So again, I'm just grateful for that. Thank you.
Thank you very much for being here. We're going to open up for some questions.
Can either department talk about this? Just how do you plan to kind of get this information more? I mean, obviously, you have the news conference today to get this information out there. Is there an effort that maybe officers are working with the community to kind of spread this information more out there? Because there has been that kind of fear with the bill coming up. What's the kind of communication plan beyond something like this?
We'll be communicating that to all the members of our department, reiterating policy 514. We'll be doing roll call training. We'll also be using our community policing officers to convey that message to the community, and our supervisors and commanders will be monitoring them. And the bottom line for us is we're going to continue to police as we always have, including communities of undocumented citizens. That's not our role here. We want everyone in the community of Wichita, and I know Jeff feels the same way about the county of Sedgwick, to know that if they're a victim of crime, they can feel quite secure calling the police or the sheriff's department and knowing they will be treated as a victim of crime, and there'll be no inquiry into their immigration status. Additionally, if we're not going to pull cars over and question the driver about his or her passengers and requesting documentation, that would result in disciplinary action within the Wichita Police Department. So if we were to actually enforce that law, it would be to protect maybe an undocumented person who is in the country and is being exploited and is a victim of human smuggling or human trafficking. It's pretty, I'm sorry, could you repeat that one more time?
Yeah, can you elaborate on the extent of the concerns that exist within Wichita or Sedgwick County regarding human smuggling crimes? Like, is it really that prevalent of an issue?
Oh, most certainly it is. And I think that's true for most major metropolitan areas, especially with the opioid crisis that's occurring. And we also know that even we're talking about people that are not being exploited because of an addiction. We know that undocumented persons who are often afraid, and that's why this press conference is so important, that are afraid to report when the exploitation to law enforcement because they fear that their immigration status will cause them to be removed from the country. They're especially vulnerable to this type of crime. So that's why we're here today to make that clear that we would only enforce this law to protect someone, including undocumented victims of exploitation. It would not be used against them, or it wouldn't be used against someone that's driving them to work or doing some other. It's a very generous community in here in Wichita and with throughout the county, and we have various agencies that are here providing support to undocumented persons, and certainly they're not committing any crime, and they won't be charged with doing so in the future. But we take human smuggling very serious, and it's all too prevalent here.
So a lot of the concerns that I picked up on speaking with community members is that some of the word choice is a little bit, it's very vague. So I wanted to ask both agencies how you're defining when someone is receiving anything of value and what those parameters are. Like, for example, some people worry that if they're providing housing to a person, is that considered value? Is it just financial incentives?
No. What the definition that we'll be using is if someone is benefiting financially from the exploitation of another. In other words, if you were transporting undocumented citizens for the purposes of prostitution or some other type of crime or forced labor, we would enforce the law against the person that was doing the exploitation. But simply being given gas money for transporting someone to work, giving somebody's a dinner or a place to stay at night, absolutely, positively not. There's no reason to have any concerns that this law will be utilized in that way in the city of Wichita. I can guarantee that.
And on that point of vagueness, do you have any talk with Mark Bennett or the city county attorney just kind of help get clarification on just kind of what will actually kind of fall under this law in terms of three-part test?
So to go back to this young lady's question, first off, we've had sex trafficking laws here, which we've been inundated with when it comes to exploited missing children's unit. And so there is a sex trafficking law on the books. With this particular law, I think the spirit of it is the same as for adults that are trafficked, whether it be for sex, whether it be for to force them into labor, those type of things, because the only thing that was on the books prior to that was kidnapping. And sometimes kidnapping is very hard to prove if the individual has the ability to leave this wherever environment they're in, but choose not to, which happens a lot in human smuggling, because the fact of the matter is they are indebted to these people for coming here in the first place. Can you repeat your question, please?
Have you talked with Mark Bennett or the city county attorney just regarding this law to make sure that you are following that three-part test that's laid out?
Correct. And so those are called elements of the crime. And we have, both the chief and I have received emails from Mark Bennett, his kind of stance on it, have talked to him briefly about it, and it has to meet those three criteria. So some of the confusion here is that if someone is providing somebody who is undocumented here something to benefit them, gas money, that's not a violation of this law. What's a violation of this law is individuals that brought them here or that are housing them here and are forcing them, the undocumented person, to do something that they will gain from. So that's the confusion. I hope that clarifies your question.
Have either of you guys got any pressure to enforce this at this point?
I haven't. We haven't.
Absolutely not.
What's what's your thoughts on how this would keep, so you guys are saying you won't enforce it in that way, but what's to keep KBI, AG's office using federal agents or FBI coming in and
Well, federal agents and FBI can't enforce state law. And so they can only enforce federal law. They have to, if they come across a state law violation, they have to refer it to the local jurisdiction. Secondly, it's the same elements across the state. And so again, the elements is if the person is keeping them, not necessarily against their will, but is making them do either sex trafficking or some type of indebted service because they were housing them or they brought them here, that's what's illegal about it. And that's what will be enforced.
And it sounds like, so just making sure I understand this right, you said that there was already, there's already sex trafficking and there was a kidnapping, but that was kind of hard to maybe define a little bit, or sometimes, so like,
Yeah.
it sounds like you think that the smuggling, there is a need for something.
I think the intent of what the legislators were trying to do is to give law enforcement the ability to enforce this kind of stuff. We've had, in this community, where we've had Chinese nationals, the same thing happened to them. They were brought here, undocumented, and they were put into the sex trade, or they were put into the massage parlor trade as payoff for them being able to come here. That's not kidnapping. And so that's the problem. Sex trafficking is mainly towards juveniles, mainly females that are under age of 18, which we have talked about for years in this community, about the sex trafficking that takes place of kids being taken from this community and sex trafficked in other states, and other states' kids that are brought here. Those sex trafficking laws really apply to kids under 18, and so there's a gap. And I think the intent of this law was to fill that gap for individuals that are being victimized that are coming here.
Also, do you have like any numbers on the cases of human trafficking or sex trafficking that you have seen here in Wichita and in Kansas?
I think it was 2 months ago, we had a Exploiting Missing Children's Unit meeting. We have a quarterly meeting. There was 13 cases of sex trafficking of kids under the age of 18. From a standpoint of, from the sheriff's office standpoint on people who have reported that they've been smuggled here and taken advantage of, we have not had any of those reports, but that doesn't surprise me. Even with this bill in place, those victims are not going to be as forthcoming to law enforcement because of the fear of the retribution that can be brought upon them or their family.
And most of those cases are in the Latino community or the Vietnamese community or any
The sex trafficking?
sex trafficking and human trafficking that you have seen here in Wichita?
Yeah, we haven't broken it down that way. Just to give you an example, last year there were 29 cases, case numbers for human trafficking that were drawn by the Wichita Police Department, and that resulted in 8 arrests. We could get that information for you, though. Juan would be happy to do that. And those numbers, to me, are very low. But as Jeff said, you're talking about the type of crime where the victim is very unlikely to report the crime, and we do the best we can. When we even make an arrest for prostitution, we always make sure that we offer services and that we try our best to work our way up the chain to determine who is the person that's actually doing the exploitation.
And if there is a case of someone that is victim of a crime of sex trafficking or human trafficking, how they can actually receive those services or help?
Just reach out to the Wichita Police Department, and we will have one of our vice detectives get in touch with them, and they know how to access all of those services. If it turns out to be a juvenile, the EMCU unit out here, I just think it's one of the greatest units that, in terms of the exploitation of children, I think it's one of the finest operations in the country right now, and they're especially well equipped to provide those services to juveniles. But either way, if you reach out to us, we'll make sure we get you those services.
Can you just put in a little nutshell for people what after July 1, what is going to be changing / what is not going to be changing?
I don't think anything's going to change. Absolutely nothing. We just might have an extra tool of prosecution if we do come up with a case that meets that 3-prong test, and I think that's a good thing. The important thing here, when it comes to members of the undocumented community, they have nothing to fear here in the city of Wichita. Nothing will change for them.
part of the wording of the bill, it says that an individual should have known someone's undocumented status, or that someone should have known that they were being exploited. Are you going to prosecute cases based on like absolute certainty, or are there any parameters for people that should have known that there was some exploitation going on, or that someone was undocumented?
Well, as the sheriff said, the wording is definitely very broad. It'll probably be something that has to be looked at when legislators come back in the session, and we'll do that. But as Jeff said before, we've gotten very good direction from Mark Bennett, and any type of case involving this charge, we would have to present to Mark or his staff, and they would answer that question. But the wording may be broad, but the enforcement will not. I can assure you that.
Right. We've been talking also about exploitation more at the individual level, individuals exploiting other people for personal gain. Or is that mostly what you're wanting to use, or will we also focus on businesses exploiting people, or maybe giving them underpay, or is that an OSHA thing more so than?
Well, that's more of an OSHA thing, but I mean, if we find that, we'll make the necessary referrals, and if it meets the parameters of state law, we would certainly investigate. But it's always good when you have to bring in your partners to make sure you're able to take a larger look at it, because a lot of times there's a kind of a network when you're talking about forced labor or prostitution, and they move the victims around throughout that network, so they're never in one place for very long. So that type of investigation is usually best handled within a more multi-jurisdictional task force.
And Sheriff, you said something for you, but if it comes to jail, what policies, or do you have any policies regarding just kind of ICE and immigration?
Yes, we do. We have policies within the jail that govern how we conduct business. So if a individual is arrested that is any type, they could be here legally. It doesn't matter their status. If they're a foreign national, we have to notify that individual's consulate that they have been arrested and that they're sitting in our jail, and then that starts a whole other process. And so that's one piece of it. The second piece of it is, and if you all were here 8-9 years ago, we had to talk about this extensively, that there is with ICE, they have so many hours to be able to take a person that's arrested on a crime and determine whether or not they're going to deport them. And so our policy simply says we have to notify Department of Homeland Security, specifically ICE, every day of a listing of who is in our jail. It's up to them at that point to determine what their documented status is, those type of things. We have nothing to do with that.
We have time for one more question.